Hi, I'm Tristan, and this is Thinking About Politics. So today we're celebrating the 4th of July. We're posting on the 5th here, but we're still celebrating the 4th. We want to take a moment to reflect on the day, and Independence Day is probably my most favorite holiday there is. Not only do I like all the things you get to do on that holiday, like, party and grill and check out fireworks, generally, fun things, but I also love the symbology of the holiday. It's a reminder of what this country is, or maybe could be, and the weirdly awesome political philosophy behind it. And yeah, I'm totally biased, by the way, but let me explain. My fanboy adoration here really comes down, in part, to our founding document, the Declaration of Independence. In July 1776, the 13 colonies authorized a formal declaration that they were going to separate from the British monarchy. And we celebrate that day as the founding of our independence. And, just think about it. Our nation was not founded by some conqueror. We do not celebrate our independence on the anniversary of some terrible battle. We are a nation that was founded with a sternly worded letter written to the management. And we celebrate that day with fireworks and parades. It's flippin' nuts. We celebrate the day, a bunch of guys decided to send a piece of mail. But it's a definite reminder that we are a nation of ideas, right? I've heard it said before, America is not just some nation that's south of Canada and north of Mexico. It is really an idea. It has to be. We're a republic founded by a letter, and we are a republic of letters in our most ideal form. But let's celebrate the 4th by taking a closer look at this letter. Now, looking broadly, you can break this thing up into 3 parts, or at least I can. There's 2 paragraphs opening things up, giving us a lay of the land. Then there's a list of about 27 things that revolutionaries took issue with, things that they didn't like that the monarch was doing. And then it rounds out with about 3 paragraphs. I'd say a little bit about what the colonists have done to try to get satisfaction before this, ending with a declaration that, it's all been for naught, and the colonies are and ought to be free and independent states. So let's take a real quick fly by this stuff and look at what it all says, shall we? And I'm looking at a copy of the document you can find on archives.gov. I'll have a link in the description. Maybe I'll pin a comment with it. I don't know. It'll be somewhere. It'll be somewhere. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another and to assume the powers of the earth, separate and equal station which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Alright, let's unpack that. So what he's saying here is sometimes there is one group of people that's got to separate into 2. And when that happens, it looks bad if you just do it. So, a decent respect to the opinion of mankind requires that they should say what they're doing and why they're doing it. Otherwise, you just look like jerks. They're taking it upon themselves to explain the rupture that's occurred. And they start by laying down their view of the world. And this is paragraph 2. This is the main event. This is when people think of the Declaration of Independence. This is the paragraph that they think about most of the time. This has all the high points. Okay, guys, let's pull it out. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We think. This is an assumption. This is a premise upon which they're going to build an argument. They're starting here. Here's something that we think is true. What does that mean? They clearly didn't mean that slaves were equal. They clearly didn't mean that Native Americans were equal. Whatever else it might have meant, it meant this. A group of non-nobles, who had always been looked down upon, was no longer accepting that social position of inferiority. In a medieval society, the monarch and the aristocrats, the people with funny hats, they weren't just the people in charge. They were like a different species. They were completely separate from the common, the rude rabble. It's a completely different worldview than we have today, than some of us have today. And our founders recognized, at least, when they put themselves up to the monarchs, their self-appointed social superiors, they said, yeah, you're not that great. Editorial for a second. Even though our founders did not mean to include a lot of people, their example of standing next to self-appointed social superiors, eyeballing them once or twice and saying, yeah, you're not so big, that's going to be replicated time and time again in American history. And it is that example and how it has grown that is really such a source of our power as a nation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All we're saying here is the men in funny hats aren't special. Everybody's equal. Some people are bigger, some people are stronger, some people are smarter, but philosophically we're all more or less the same. Even the least among us is worth something. And no matter how much you think you're worth, you're no better than the least among us. So that's proposition 1. Proposition 2 is that we're equal because everybody has rights. Just inalienably. As a fact of being a human being, you, me, everybody. They all have rights everywhere. You have the right to live. Nobody has the right to just come up and kill you for no reason. You have the right to be free, at least so far as that goes. And you have the right to try to be happy. To try to live this life as best as you can. Those are two kind of related premises. Maybe they're one premise. But it's this idea that everybody's more or less equal because everybody's got rights, just as a natural fact. To secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men. So that's where governments come from. People do them to secure these rights, and they derive their power from the consent of the governed. So, it's people going along with stuff, consenting to the government that allows the government to govern. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, that is, securing those rights, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So that's a lot there. We start with that premise that everybody's equal and everybody has rights. And so from there, governments are instituted amongst people to secure these rights. Governments derive their power from the consent of the governed. When a form of government becomes destructive enough, the people are allowed to change it and alter it. And those are all logically follow from the idea that everybody's equal and everybody has rights. The governments aren't special. They're not put here by heaven. The people in funny hats weren't sent here by God to save us. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shewn that mankind are far more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So, Jefferson and our founders are acknowledging that, most of the time, people are going to suffer what is sufferable for as long as they can suffer it. They're not just going to rise up and change things. However, it's that long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their duty to throw off such a government, and to provide new guards for their security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such now is the necessity which constrains them to alter their systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Phew! Alright, so there's a lot in that one. But again, you can kind of walk it through like this. There's an assumption. People are equal and they have rights. From there comes the idea that governments are instituted amongst people. They don't come from heaven. They don't come from any place else. That they derive their power when people kind of consent to them. And that people can overthrow governments and change them. They usually won't change them. They'll usually suffer what's sufferable. But in this case, the behavior of the king has been so outrageous. It is necessary now for the colonies to change their system of government. And now they go on and they list 27 things that the king was doing that they didn't particularly care for here. The king is using a lot of power to dissolve legislatures, pick and choose the laws he wants to assent to, and they feel that their rights to participate in the legislative process have been infringed upon. Number 7 has to do with immigration and not allowing enough people in. 8, 9, and 10 have to deal with making judges and other officials dependent on the king and appointing new offices to harass the people. Rendered the military power independent of the civil power. Quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. Cutting off trade with all parts of the world. Imposing taxes without our consent. And then the last few here are really about how the king, has declared war on the colonies. And what's this last one here? He excited domestic insurrections among us. He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is indistinguished destruction of all ages, sex, and conditions. Dudes. Like, I know it was a Revolutionary War thing, but, like, come on, guys. So after listing all those reasons, there are 3 last paragraphs that really round out the discussion here. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. We've sent you petitions, yet haven't writ back. The colonists complain that they have tried to plead their case to their English countrymen, who they thought they were their brothers, but they too have been deaf to the voice of justice. Even though we were once countrymen, we now must hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, as enemies in war and friends in peace. So the last paragraph again just says, hey, because of all this stuff, we have the right to be free. We are free. We have no more obligations to you, Crown. We are going to be a full and independent nation. More than that, but these common people come together, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So the Declaration of Independence for me is less interesting as an academic document and more about as a symbolic document. What it can mean for a country like the United States, where there are 300 plus million people, diverse, with different opinions, with different points of view. The Constitution that the founders hammered out was an imperfect document, and it established a slave-holding republic. And a lot of people can point to that, and they say that that is American hypocrisy. And I really want to stress that, no. The way we use the founders is not to say, hey, look at them. They got it right. They were so forward-thinking and amazing. We don't have to pretend that. But what we can do is we can take the example for what it is. That a group of people, long told they were inferior, eyeballed the people with funny hats, the people with dads with special names, the lords and the fine ladies, and they said, yeah, you ain't so great, and I ain't so bad. We're probably equal. It's that example, and the example of pledging to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, that we can take away and really figure out how to work together. This is a big place, and there's room enough for everybody. Anyway, that's it for me. Until next time, keep thinking.